That will take us to our amended agenda discussion item number 21, which is a proposed 2019-2020 calendar shown in Exhibit M. And I will turn it over to our Director of Communications, Ms. Goggins. Thank you, Ms. Goggins.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Each fall, the school district begins the process of creating a school year calendar for the next year using input from various stakeholder groups, including principals, parents, and staff. The version that you see before you tonight includes input from these groups and features from 2 drafts that were shared with the group for comparison purposes. I will mention a few highlights of the calendar that the groups created. First, the first day of school for students would be August the 21st, and the last day for students would be on June 5th. The first day for teachers would be August 13th, and the last day for teachers would be June 8th. One of the new features of our calendar is a fall break, which, if approved, would be October 25th and October 28th. The fall break was a response to a trend in inclement weather and our effort to provide more flexibility for makeup days earlier in the year if needed. Winter break would be December 23rd through January 3rd for students, and parents tell us that this full 2-week Monday through Friday block is preferred when possible. And then finally, spring break would again be around the second full week of April, April 13th through the 17th. We want to thank the parents, staff, and school leaders who provided careful thought and consideration in helping us draft the 2019-2020 calendar, as well as the Office of Accountability, which work with us to capture the input from these groups. And with that, I'd take any questions that you have.
Ms. Hutchison.
I'm looking at the last day for staff teachers, which is June the 8th. It's a Monday. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if there was any discussion, because that, for people who take vacations, usually it's from a Saturday to a Saturday or Sunday to Sunday, and that dips into the second full week of June. And so my question is, was that discussed that could really interfere with some week-long reservations? And if so, would there be another day, possibly March 13th, or there might be some other days in there that we could use as staff development day, so that the last day for students would be June 4th, and the last day for, or that staff development teacher work day would be, would be June the 5th.
Yes, ma'am, there was some discussion specifically in our faculty advisory about that. And some of the thought was we could move that 8th day up to the 12th and have teachers come back on Monday, but their preference was, let's start on Tuesday. They did not mind the Monday after to kind of do cleanup and follow-up work in their classrooms on the 8th. So it was a discussion, but not enough for us to remove it and move it somewhere else.
Okay. I mean, I'll respect what the committee
Mr.
said.
Cates. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No.
Just to ask the public to encourage their legislators, a flexible start date is really what we need. Right now, we're bound by statute when we can start, and that doesn't give any flexibility really to the districts. And so while we continue to raise our voice about that, and the School Board Association raises their voice about that, the voice that's heard the loudest is, I think, the parent voice. And so any of you that are willing to be an advocate on that cause, we certainly would be happy to supply information on why that flexible start date is so important. Ms. Goggins, there was a draft, I think I maybe saw it parent cabinet, I don't remember. I could probably go back and find it, but I won't do that. That indicated the number of instructional days at the end of each month. Well, that's not critical. That was a nice kind of visual to remind when you look at that calendar why we're tracking along. And while sometimes it's like, well, let's, my my son is giving me grief about, Dad, why can't we get out Monday instead of this day? I'm like, well, look at the number, I don't know if that was taken off intentionally or if there were some other concerns, and I'd yield to any other concerns, but if that's not a difficult ad, I kind of like that.
It's not a difficult ad, and it was there for planning purposes, just so we made sure we got the counts correct. And we have never had a press release or a lot of content with our calendar. We just put it out there, but it's a great thought, and we might just have a press release, here's our calendar, and explain it a little bit. Specifically, that point about not being able to start beyond the third Monday of August, because we mention that to all the groups before we bring the calendar to them, just to remind.
Thanks. Ms. Hammond.
This might be more Dr. Melton. If we have a lot of increment days and the governor, will say, 3 don't have to be, made up, do we still as a district decide, because of the learning and how important it is for teachers to get those days in, is it still left up to us, even if they're forgiven by the state, that we can change what we have that flexibility?
Yes, ma'am, and there's a disclaimer. Actually, tonight, Mr. Giuliano had planned to bring policy, I believe it's IC, Mr. Giuliano, without looking at my notes, about the school year. We have got to update our policy in School District 5 so that we can accept the opportunity to forgive beyond the 3 that are required by state law. So right now, we have already, for this year, for an example, we have 5 days that we have to make up. Make sure I'm calculating correctly, Ms. Goggins. We've announced 3, but we've got to capture the other 2 unless the policy were to allow us to waive, if the board were to choose to waive. So then we've got to make sure that policy is revised for that. The governor certainly works with the General Assembly, but we follow their lead, but by state law, we're required to make up 3. And just as a reminder for everyone, although there is a draft out there of a pilot, there are 5 districts that are trying the e-learning. Closest by to us is Kershaw County. So I've been enjoying talking with the superintendent of Kershaw to see how it's going for them. But we are preparing as if that's not going to be extended to us as we start this conversation tonight. If that were to come available to us, we would bring it back to the board for your input on something like that if we were to try to use e-learning in lieu of makeup days. So there are some flexible opportunities with those decisions to make, but we feel like we're compelled to make some other decisions about the calendar at this point to make sure we can keep moving forward to get things prepared for the 1920 school year.
And Mr. Gant, this is the same subject, but it's not that point. Can teachers ever, do we have as a district any leeway with the calendar where we have so many days where the kids are finished basically with testing, and so many teachers feel like it's just, I'm sure you hear it in committees, like they're kind of just babysitting, but we have to have so many days in school.
Right.
Is there any flexibility for us as a district to have those days not be those days where, and then you just have a behavioral problem because there's nothing going on, but they have to come to school because they've even taken up the books.
Right.
But I guess we can't help that, can we?
Well, what we try to do is we have 3 days that we are allowed to have as half days. We try to hold those 3. There are some districts that do one just before the winter break and then use the other 2 at the end of the year or throughout the year. It's been our history that we've saved those 3 to the end of the year because we do exams. That's Mr. Giuliano's responsibility to have the exam schedule that he includes our secondary schools with. So our high schools, except for the seniors, of course, because that date is influenced by our contract with the Colonial Life Arena for our graduation, but our underclassmen are taking exams all the way up to the end of the school year for our high school students, and our middle school students, of course, are involved with testing. Our elementary schools, they oftentimes like to reserve those last few days for end-of-the-year celebrations and assemblies of some sort or presentations. So we don't dictate how elementary schools were to use that, but we want to make sure that they use the time as best as they can, because we know that attendance that Dr. Harris is responsible for every day counts, which is one of the policies that Dr. Harris has been updating to make sure we can be in compliance with that too. So it's lots of details and decisions go into those influence of decision.
Well, I had promised teachers that I
Sure.
would ask that question if we
Sure.
had any leeway about those last days.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Thank you.
Any other discussion? And we did need to have this discussion tonight. Seeing none, that will take us to our last item. But before we go there, I want Mr. Richardson, I hate some people left here that are in the financial end, but I hope in my statement a little while ago to Ms. Hammond, I mentioned no millage increase, and I talked about 0%, but it would be a millage increase because we got to pay back the money. So, sorry. I'm trying to think if I said that. I'm going to look back and see if I did, but I did think about it. I said, I'm clearing this up. So, yes, there would, no matter
Yeah,
what.
I
We
knew
got to pay the
I
money
knew you
back.
teasing.
My bad. It's been a
That's
long
okay.
day.
You can tease.
All right, that brings us to item number 23, which is to adjourn. Do I have a motion? Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we adjourn.
Do you have a second? Mr. White? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. We thank you all for being here and going through the process with us.